Both of us have embarked here on a journey. We have arrived here at COP from two very different places, but we are connected by the fact that we are living in a broken world that has systemically marginalized women and girls, especially women and girls from vulnerable communities. While discussing the system and change here at COP, we must remember that gender-differentiated impacts of the climate crisis. Remember the fact that it is our women and girls that feel the brunt of this climate emergency that further amplifies the already existing societal inequalities. But that's why we're here today, why we're supposed to be here today, to work and to fight so that all little girls inherit the world that they deserve, to lay the foundation for change to grow. Amal brought with her today seeds. Seeds to physically share, seeds to inspire, seeds to represent hope. The beautiful thing about seeds is that you need to be selfless enough to be content in the fact that you may not eat the fruit or bear the flowers of these seeds you have planted, but feel it was worth it, knowing that your children will live with its beauty. The inspirational thing about seeds is that those who planted them must always have hope that they may flourish. Hope that these small gems of possibility may grow into abundance and feed the collective village. The enlightening thing about seeds is that they teach us that the work continues after planting. Our seeds must be tended to, watered, pruned, fed, and checked on. I hope that these seeds Amal has journeyed here with today can inspire you all and remind you the importance of your role as planters of a global future. Remind you to plant the solutions, targets, and hard limits that can help remedy this broken world. To plant hope that will turn into justice. To plant seeds that will grow into change. But most importantly, I hope you remember that these seeds will not grow without work, that the real work will happen outside of COP, as we put words into action, as we cut our emissions, water our renewables, feed our resilience, and shine sunlight on our collective mission for climate justice. The seed Amal has presented today represents all girls who could not be here on this stage. Young girls who are counting on you, who are counting on us. They are counting on us to put in the work. Girls who deserve more, who deserve better from this world. This is what Amal represents. This is what her seeds represent. May these seeds be a reminder of the work to come. It is my absolute honor to stand by the beautiful Amal. And I hope you can all stand with us and commit to being planters of real seeds today that may turn into flowers tomorrow. I will hand these seeds out when our ministers are ready, but I hope that within these negotiations, that within these rooms, you may be able to plant them, and then once we leave COP, we may all tend to them so that they grow into a beautiful world that is deserving of girls like Amal and deserving to have all girls be safe within it. Thank you very much.
Many, many thanks indeed, little Amal. We are so proud that you are here with us to share this incredibly powerful message. And thank you, Brianna, for sharing the words. That you remind us all that the girls, our daughters now and those in the future, are the ones who will plant the seeds, be selfless in helping them to grow, and indeed make sure that girls of the future continue to look after our planet, as we know that too many of them do without the support or the care or the protection that they need. And it's our job as we go forwards to make sure that the questions of gender and climate action are absolutely firmly rooted in the little girls of the future. Thank you. If I may, I'll now invite the COP President, Alok Sharma, to join us.
Good morning, everyone, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you all, particularly little Amal and Brianna. And thank you, Brianna, for such a powerful speech, setting out very clearly why at this conference and beyond we need to take action. And also thank you for your amazing speech at the World Leaders Summit last week as well. I think delivered in front of world leaders that I hope made them understand why we need to take action on gender. But of course, friends, today's Gender Day cuts across all the work that we're doing here in Glasgow, because gender and climate are profoundly intertwined. And we know that in the impact of climate change affects women and girls disproportionately. And we know from our efforts to tackle climate change that it is more effective when we put women and girls at the heart of those efforts. Now, in my time as COP President, I've had the opportunity of meeting women's groups, girls driving climate action around the world, who I think, in Brianna's words, are not drowning, but they're fighting. They're fighting for themselves, they're fighting for their communities. And I recently had the privilege to speak to some Malagasy women who are living through what some have called the first climate-induced drought in southern Madagascar. And they told me that women are empowering each other to survive. But we also spoke about the damaging impact of climate change and how that can impact gender equality. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to speak alongside Malala, and you will know that her foundation, the Malala Fund, estimates that at least 4 million girls won't complete their education due to climate-related crises. And that is just this year. Just this year. Frankly, that is an absolute travesty. And it's a dangerous one because, as well as being a fundamental good in itself, education empowers girls and equips them to deal with climate, to deal with the effects of climate change and to take climate action. So equality cannot be a casualty of climate. And that means we need deeds, not words. We need action on gender cutting across our work to reduce emissions, to protect communities and build resilience. So we must empower women and girls and support them to create the change. And we have a framework. We need to have one going further as well, but we have one, the Gender Action Plan, which was agreed in Madrid back in 2019. But what we actually need is for every single country to implement this plan that was put together, and to be guided by the UN Women-convened Feminist Action for Climate Justice Coalition, which was launched earlier this year. And I'm very pleased to say that today, new initiatives from the UK government are going to advance these efforts. So firstly, on finance. We are committed to using our climate finance to empower women and girls to amplify their voices and address their needs. So today I can announce that UK support for our £120 million Bangladesh Climate and Environment Programme will be set out, and this will support women's leadership, their access to finance, education and skills, all the while tackling climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution. You'll also be aware that yesterday the UK government announced over £270 million to help communities across Asia and the Pacific better plan, invest in and fund climate action. And today, I'm pleased to announce that £45 million of that funding will be invested in the Community Resilience Partnership Programme, supporting local communities and grassroots women's groups to adapt to climate change whilst challenging gender inequalities. And I'm also pleased to note that the UK funding to the Women Delegates Fund has supported six delegates to attend COP26, because ultimately we are committed to women's participation at every level and through all our work. And that is why we are hosting Gender Day today. Now, over the next few hours, we will hear further ambitious commitments that support women and girls to take action on climate, that center them in adaptation, that advance gender in finance, and that support participation in the UNFCCC. And I'm very grateful to everyone stepping up with commitments. And I hope that together we generate that momentum that builds in force and impact across this vital decade for our climate. So let's work together, friends, to create a world where women and girls are at the heart of all our climate action decisions. Thank you.
Alok, thank you for your kind remarks. I'm very proud of the commitments that the UK has made today, and thank you for ensuring that this COP has put gender at the very heart of all our discussions. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we will turn to a video intervention from Julienne Baseke, coordinator of the Association des Femmes des Médias, a network of women journalists based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is the first of today's 3 video submissions, part of the Equality Fund's September 2021 Dialogue on Feminist Climate Action, an initiative amplifying the voices of feminists in the Global South.
Le changement climatique dans notre communauté locale s'est traduit par une perturbation des saisons. Les femmes représentent la main-d'œuvre agricole ici, et l'agriculture, c'est l'activité traditionnelle de femmes. Ça veut dire que les femmes doivent travailler, doivent cultiver pour faire vivre leur famille, pour nourrir leur famille, pour scolariser leurs enfants. Et du coup, il y a perturbation de la saison culturelle. AFEM est consciente du fait que le changement climatique affecte différemment les hommes et les femmes. Et cela influe sur le rapport de genre ainsi que sur le statut social et des hommes et de femmes. AFEM, à travers sa radio d'équité du genre, qui est Mama Radio, elle produit des programmes, de magazines, de spots, d'éducation pour sensibiliser les femmes sur la question du changement climatique. Nous recommandons comme stratégie idéale la reforestation, le reboisement et également l'agriculture. Promouvoir l'agriculture en impliquant la femme. Et comme les femmes constituent la frange de la population qui est plus responsable de la cuisson, donc qui utilise beaucoup le charbon et le bois de chauffe, nous pensons que renforcer les capacités de femmes sur les énergies renouvelables serait vraiment une des solutions efficaces.
We will now begin the Ministerial Panel. We will be hearing from ministers and leaders from 8 countries, each coming forward with commitments demonstrating the importance of gender equality as a critical part of climate action. These commitments and the initiatives that follow will have a real and positive impact on the lives of women and girls around the world. A reminder, if I may, to my speakers, a maximum of 3 minutes, if that's possible. And we'll start, if we may, from Bolivia, with the Executive Director of the Plurinational Authority of Mother Earth, Angelica Ponce.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias. cambio de 36 nacionalidades, lenguas y culturas del Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia. En este mismo caminar, hoy ya siendo parte del gobierno, nuestro compromiso y por supuesto nuestro reclamo es seguir caminando porque nos falta mucho todavía profundizar la igualdad y la equidad de género también como en otros países. Nosotros como mujeres queremos ser parte de los espacios de poder político y por supuesto los espacios de poder de decisión a nivel nacional e internacional. En esta lucha de la justicia climática, nosotras las mujeres indígenas fuimos quienes vivimos día a día la cruda realidad del cambio climático dentro de nuestros territorios. Somos las que sembramos, las que cosechamos y las que abastecemos la canasta familiar en diferentes sectores, por ejemplo en Bolivia. Hermanos y hermanas, el gran compromiso como gobiernos desarrollados deberían tener una mirada más al pueblo, más a los países subdesarrollados en la ayuda correspondiente, en los fondos de cooperación de la justicia climática que debería llegar a los lugares más marginados y vulnerables, como también países en desarrollo como Bolivia. Nosotros como bolivianas, como mujeres bolivianas, fuimos las más afectadas con un golpe de Estado y además el cambio climático dentro de nuestros hogares nos ha reflexionado profundamente de que debemos empezar a contribuir cada una de nosotras, de las familias, en cuidar nuestras plantas medicinales que también son muy importantes porque nuestros antepasados, nuestros hermanos, nuestros abuelos, nuestros abuelas, antes no había medicamento académico, sino más bien plantas medicinales. Y hoy por hoy hemos aprendido a recuperar también esto. Nosotros como mujeres tenemos un solo sentimiento. Todas las mujeres del mundo somos mujeres dadoras de vida, guardadoras de semillas, que movemos sentimientos, sensibilidad en la humanidad. Y nuestro gran compromiso como mujeres debe ser la lucha de manera conjunta y hermanada, haciendo alianzas de que el mundo también escuche y piense de la manera que nosotras pensamos las mujeres. Las mujeres somos sensibles. Hoy podemos reconocer el mundo pensado desde el hombre ha destruido también, ha destruido muchas cosas. Y realmente hoy quisiera decir yo como mujer indígena y autoridad de Bolivia, que también el mundo debería pensarse desde el pensamiento de la mujer, desde el sentimiento de la mujer. ¿Cómo sería un mundo pensado de la mujer? Terminaría con la violencia, terminaría con la violación, infanticidio y feminicidio. Pienso que sería la solución muy importante de tomar a las mujeres en los espacios de poder de manera igualitaria y equitativa. Me dirijo ante el mundo entero, sé que muchas mujeres estarían felices de estar en estos espacios, pero es un poco difícil acceder a estos lugares donde se deciden por todo un mundo y realmente mi gran deseo sería de que por lo menos para los años siguientes, nosotros como pueblos indígenas y como autoridades podamos acceder a los espacios más decisión, de toma de decisiones, poder decidir. Lamentablemente los países subdesarrollados todavía no hemos podido llegar a alcanzar la justicia o por lo menos los compromisos de los países desarrollados en este tema del cambio climático. Las ayudas directas a nuestros pueblos indígenas y no así con intermediarios. Muchas gracias. Quiero pedirles a cada una de ustedes, hermanas, de que no estamos solas. Todas somos una, seamos del campo o seamos de la ciudad. Somos seres humanos, somos mujeres que sentimos por nuestros hijos, por nuestras hijas y además sentimos por las generaciones que vienen detrás de nosotras. Hoy las mujeres también desafiamos, ¿no?, de tener decisiones como mujeres desde el sentimiento, desde la vivencia, como mujer, como madre, como dadora de vida. Queremos pensar un mundo mejor, un futuro mejor, pensado desde la mujer, con sentimiento, con vivencia, y como mujer indígena que siembra y que guarda la semilla, quiero decirles al mundo entero de que demos la oportunidad a las mujeres también en los diferentes espacios de poder, no solamente en el Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, sino también en todo el mundo. Hay muchas mujeres que quisiéramos estar en estos espacios de poder hacer alianzas de lucha. Y realmente hoy veo muchas mujeres en esta sala que están comprometidas de llevar esa semilla desde este lugar e ir a sembrar a nuestras casas. Poder generar los compromisos como países y como mujeres para poder desarrollar la transformación de vida diferente, sensible, con respeto y con igualdad. Tener los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y de las mujeres de la ciudad sean los mismos y no sean ahora como ahora. El mundo es diferenciado, el mundo es diferente. Muchos estamos en espacios más altos y otros estamos olvidados y no queremos eso. Queremos ser iguales porque tenemos los mismos derechos y somos también humanos. Muchas gracias, hermanas. Un khayaya, que la Pacha los bendiga, y un saludo especial a nuestro hermano Sharman. Cuando vino a Bolivia, fui quien la recibió con los brazos abiertos para poder hacer conocer también mi país. Y estoy muy agradecida de estar acá juntamente también en este espacio, de poder ver este gran desarrollo y los compromisos de gobiernos que se vayan cumpliendo y no solo queden en papeles y en acuerdos, sino que se cumplan, hermanas. Un khayaya. Muchas gracias.
Angelica, thank you for that impassioned intervention. Women are the keepers of life. If we will take that home with us, I think we will be making great progress. Monica, if I may, Monica Medina, the US Assistant Secretary, and if I may ask you to try and stick to 3 minutes, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, delegates, friends, and excellencies. First, let me thank Alex Sharma and the UK Presidency and the entire team for leading such an important event. And I also want to acknowledge the tireless work of one of our fellow speakers here today, our Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. It's an honor. I just want to say what an honor it is to be here on the heels of passing the bipartisan infrastructure legislation in our country that she engineered. It's a once-in-a-generation investment in our country to turn this climate crisis into an opportunity. So I want to thank her for her leadership and the leadership that it will allow us to have at home and abroad. As I look around this room and the millions of women and girls leading this movement, I see an incredible group of environmental defenders. We're using our voices to call for the changes we need, protecting our communities and nature, and leading the innovations of the future. But even as we take action, women and girls are so often the ones bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. I heard just yesterday from two remarkable female leaders from Uganda and Nigeria. They spoke about how climate impacts in their communities mean that too many women are losing their traditional livelihoods, struggling to provide food for themselves and their families, and facing increased risks of violence and conflict. This is a topic of critical importance here at COP26, but one that has too often been sidelined from the discussion in these halls. But these intersections and the disproportionate impacts of climate change can no longer be ignored. My friend and executive director of the White House Gender Policy Council, Jen Klein, recently said climate change is not gender neutral, and my friend Samantha Power, our USAID administrator, put it even more pointedly: climate change is sexist. Women and girls, especially those who are members of marginalized populations, are on the front lines of this crisis. Climate-related disasters hinder access to essential services, including sexual and reproductive health care. Women are less likely to have emergency savings compared to men, and women can often be the ones left behind in dangerous situations following disasters. So let me skip ahead to the programs that the U.S. has brought forth at this incredible COP. Let me just list a few. First, we have our national strategy on gender equity and equality, which has dedicated an entire chapter to women. We've also launched a new Gender Equity and Equality Action Fund with at least $14 million to be invested in gender-responsive climate programming on women and girls, participation in the green economy, and resilience to climate shocks. Our USAID is scaling up its advanced gender in the Environment Initiative in partnership with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature to provide tailored support to countries to develop climate change gender action plans. It's fitting that today is also Science and Innovation Day here at COP because women are also leading the way in the scientific field. Our USAID is partnering with NASA to make a $3 million investment in Severe, a program that will build opportunities for women in the sciences and translate that innovation into resilience for women farmers on the ground. And my colleagues at the State Department are putting forward more than $5 million towards a range of gender and climate programs. So in closing, I just want to emphasize that the climate future is female. Why? I think it is because we deliver life. We are mothers, we are daughters, we are sisters, wives, and grandmothers and girlfriends, and our connection to this issue is primal. For me, it began with my daughter who had severe asthma as a young girl, and I watched her struggle on a breathing machine for just the very air to breathe. And it continues with my mother, who is a passionate advocate for elephants, and it reminds me every day that we must protect nature. We as women are connected. We are at the forefront of this crisis, and we're at the forefront of the solutions. Why? Because that's what women have always done. They've protected their communities, the nature surrounding them, and used their voices to call for the changes we need, and then figured out how to do it. Thank you all, and let's get to work.
Thank you, Monica. Indeed, I think the climate future is indeed female. And thank you to the US for your enormous commitments and that you're very much back at the forefront of helping us to solve this challenge. If I may, I'll turn now to our Swedish colleague, the Minister for International Development Cooperation, Per Olsson Frith.
Thank you, Minister. Indeed, a pleasure and an honor to be here. We've had 1.5 years of COVID-19, a time of backsliding, hard-won gains for human rights, gender equality, democracy are being rolled back as we speak, as we meet. The inequality setback is clearly the result of an incomplete analysis of the needs of a society in crisis. And on top of this, we have the climate crisis. Worldwide, women have less access than men to voice and power and resources such as land, credit, agricultural inputs, decision-making structures, technology training, extension services that would enhance their capacity to adapt to climate change. Now, women are not the polluters of this world, yet they carry the consequences of climate change on their shoulders. Women represent the majority of the world's poor, are proportionally more dependent on threatened natural resources for their livelihood. And this is true, particularly in rural areas where women shoulder the major responsibility for household water supply and energy, for cooking, heating, as well as for food security. 1 in 3 girls does not have access to clean water and often lack facilities for menstrual hygiene. Without a gender perspective, we risk to miss out on long-term sustainable solutions. We miss out on invaluable knowledge needed for a sustainable green transition. So we need to include women in all types of decision makers. Now, I represent a feminist government, and Sweden conducts a feminist foreign policy. This means that me and my colleagues need to ensure in every decision we make that women and girls should have the same rights, same duties, the same possibilities as men and boys. A sustainable planet, sustainable peace, security and development cannot be achieved if half of the world's population are excluded. Now, Minister, in 2019, Sweden adopted a climate policy action plan which states that a gender perspective is to permeate all climate action. Climate action should be based on the different prerequisites and equal possibilities of rights of women and girls, as well as men and boys. Gender equality has been systematically mainstreamed into Sweden's development cooperation, and Sweden has spearheaded efforts to adopt ambitious gender policies, not least in the multilateral climate funds. In 2020, the Swedish government assigned the Swedish Environment Protection Agency to integrate a gender perspective in all their core operations. The agency has also developed a proposal for national strategy to integrate a gender perspective in the implementation of the Paris Agreement in Sweden, and this plan is now currently processed by the government. Now, the transition to low-carbon development and climate change adaptation is a major transformative endeavor requiring the participation of all countries, all communities, and people of all gender. Gender-equal societies are less likely to end up in conflict. Women's equal rights and opportunities are essential, not only for achieving justice and equality, but also for economic development, for sustainability. A feminist approach and an ambitious climate efforts are not only issues of rights, it's simply the only smart thing to do. And Sweden is ready to continue to lead on climate action, to continue to lead on gender equality, not as two different things, but two mutually reinforcing sides of the same thing, and that thing being our common future. With that, allow me to thank you, Minister, for convening this important meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for showing the way, and I think Sweden's gender equality throughout all policy is a beacon for many, many others to try and follow. So thank you for your leadership on that. If I may now turn to Nigeria, we have with us Mr. Musa Hassan, who is the Permanent Secretary and Deputy Minister for Nigeria. Mr. Hassan.
Thank you very much for this invitation, Honourable Minister, and all delegates available. Nigeria faces various environmental challenges which are climate change induced, such as erosion, flooding, landslides, etc. These problems in turn have an adverse effect on livelihoods within the communities, especially our farmers, women, and children. However, the direct impact of these challenges has already put a lot of women in serious problems. In implementing the Paris Agreement and Nigeria's national determined contributions, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change at the Conference of Parties COP23 adopted a gender action plan which would be integrated into parties' climate promises in the Paris Agreement. For a more holistic action plan, it is important that Nigeria has a unified voice on gender and climate change issues. In domesticating the Gender Action Plan, a national action plan on gender and climate change was developed. The goal of the action plan is to ensure that national climate change processes in Nigeria mainstream gender considerations to guarantee inclusiveness of all required. The document will serve as a guide into climate change and challenges to women. The need to mainstream climate change into national action plans and action cannot be overemphasized, though the priority sectors covered in action plan were selected according to Nigerian national determined contribution and the economic recovery and growth plan. In July 2016, the Federal Ministry of Environment, through the Department of Climate Change, commenced the process of developing the Gender Action Plan by organizing stakeholders consultative workshop. A draft national action plan was developed as an output. Further consultations were done, and subsequently, Nigeria was able to develop her own action plan on gender. I have it here. What is now required is action. We need more support, more technical support and financial support, but Nigeria is just on the right track because we also have other agencies that are directly responsible for women affairs. We have Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, we have Women Development Centers, we have other areas also that have even our Constitution has a direct effect on the issues and challenges of women and children. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much indeed. You're quite right, and the hashtag for today is Act on the Gap. I think that's exactly the message that you bring so strongly to these discussions. Thank you very much indeed. If I may now turn to Canada and the Ambassador for the Environment, Patricia Fuller. Patricia.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. En tant qu'ambassadrice du Canada pour les changements climatiques, je suis honorée d'être présente à cette discussion très importante. Canada is fully committed to advancing gender equality in climate action, not only because women are more impacted by climate change, but also because climate action cannot be effective without the full participation of women. In Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, partners who have worked with us over the past 5 years know well that Canada has placed gender equality at the center of all of our development projects. So this has meant in projects that range from, for example, advancing the leadership of women in water security projects in the Peruvian Andes with the application of indigenous knowledge, to advancing the participation of women negotiators in the UNFCCC process. So I'm pleased to announce today that as part of the doubling of Canada's climate finance pledge to $5.3 billion over 5 years, that Canada will apply the target of 80% for projects that will target gender equality outcomes and ensure gender-sensitive decision-making. So this means, for example, that when we are working with organizations, we will be looking to see what is the participation of women in the decision-making processes, what is the participation in the boards of companies that are involved in our climate finance projects, and how are women involved in the supply chains that are relevant to climate action. I'm also pleased to say that Canada will join the Feminist Action for Climate Justice Coalition and advocate for the integration of gender considerations in domestic and international climate policy. And I'm also pleased to note that we're actively engaged in supporting the adoption, or the implementation rather, of the Gender Action Plan of the UNFCCC. And just a few weeks ago, we presented a formal submission to the UNFCCC highlighting the gender differentiated impacts of climate change and the role of women as agents of change in Canada. Donc, j'espère qu'en faisant la promotion des engagements et des mesures qui favorisent l'équité des sexes dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques, nous apporterons une réponse mondiale à ce fléau climatique qui sera réellement inclusive. So, to conclude, we need all involved, because if we are to win the fight against climate change, we need to have women participating equally in climate action. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Patricia, thank you, and thank you for Canada's commitment that 80% of your projects will have gender equality outcomes as a necessity. That is a huge leap and something that I think all countries should consider. That's the sort of way that quietly and effectively we can shift the dial here. Thank you. If I may, I'll turn to Ecuador and the Undersecretary for Climate Change, Ms. Karina Barrera. Karina.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alok Sharma, distinguished panelists, and everybody, good morning. I want to start my speech saying there are different ways to look at women's role in climate action. Some will see us vulnerable actors or victims of the effects of climate change. But today, I want to highlight the importance of women as agents of change to transform the territories, enterprises, and to increase the climatic ambition. We are the power that haven't been enough enabled. I just want to switch to Spanish now. En Ecuador hemos trabajado de una fuerte manera en crear un marco de gobernanza que pueda anclar nuestra ambición climática a través de nuestra NDC. Hemos trabajado en incluir nuestra ambición en transporte, energía, agricultura, cambio y uso de suelo como nuestros ejes centrales. Pero en este ejercicio encontramos información valiosa sobre cuál es nuestro estado frente a la acción climática. Hemos encontrado que uno de los sectores más importantes es cómo está funcionando nuestro sistema financiero, cómo llegan los créditos, especialmente a los sectores rurales, cómo se distribuyen estos créditos. Las mujeres contribuyen con el 50% a los ahorros de la economía popular y solidaria, pero solamente reciben el 30% de los créditos que llegan a ellos. Por asuntos como quién tiene la propiedad de la tierra, qué tipo de educación tengo, o la falta de capacidad para elaborar proyectos propios. Estas son las desigualdades que no permiten habilitar la acción climática. Con estos indicadores estamos desarrollando el Plan de Acción de Género de Cambio Climático en Ecuador. Estos indicadores nos permiten también incorporar una serie de herramientas en los diferentes proyectos, pero también nos llama la atención a todos los actores públicos, privados y a un sistema financiero que aún no regresa a mirar la acción climática como una prioridad. We think that climate action must involve all the actors, private sector, financial sectors, public sector, but everyone has to build together a new policy that includes women. We think that a main issue is how the money comes to the territories, how the financial model comes from the business or international model to local models and to the territories. We have to think about that. We think to be more inclusive, to distribute correctly the funds and the resources, different kind of resources. I think that climate action must be engaged, must be enhanced with the action of the communities, indigenous communities, and all people in an integrated way. Thank you.
Karina, thank you so much indeed. Now, if I may turn to Germany, we have with us the Director General in the Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Building and Nuclear Safety, Dr. Christian Paulus. Christian.
Dear Minister Anne-Marie Trevelyan, distinguished ministers, delegates and friends, thank you very much for the invitation to this important event. And I would like to extend warm greetings from Federal Minister Svenja Schulze, to whom the nexus of gender and climate is of utmost importance. At COP25 in Madrid in 2019, the enhanced Lima work program on gender and the Gender Action Plan were adopted. Now we, the parties, are to focus on implementation. The Gender Action Plan affirms that it is critical that all climate stakeholders, public and private, respond to and implement gender-related activities. And this is where our new German ICI gender strategy comes in. The International Climate Initiative is the most important financial instrument of the German Environment Ministry to support financially international climate and biodiversity action with the Global South. Since 2008, ICI has supported over 750 climate and biodiversity projects in more than 60 countries with an overall budget of 4.5 billion euro. And I'm very pleased to announce today that going forward, the ICI has decided to mainstream the integration of gender perspective and the promotion of gender justice as an action guiding principle and cross-cutting theme to the whole program. This refers equally to both the ICI project cycle and to its institutional processes and procedures. In order to realize this, the ICI gender strategy has been developed and is officially published today on our ICI website. The goal of the ICI gender strategy is to promote gender transformative approaches in international climate and biodiversity cooperation. Therefore, all projects should integrate concrete measures to reduce gender-based discrimination and inequalities. Targeted considerations of gender aspects will contribute to more effective climate and biodiversity projects. To break down the ICI gender strategy and to formulate concrete measurable targets for the next year, an ICI gender action plan is currently being developed. With this, the ICI does its part to actively anchor the guiding principle of gender justice into this funding program, as it is also demanded by our ministry's gender strategy. And I'm glad to share this important German contribution to the implementation of the UNFCCC Gender Action Plan with you today. What does it all encompass? The ICI gender strategy will specifically contribute to the following objectives of the UNFCCC GAP. First, improving gender mainstreaming in plans and strategies. Second, involving all genders in the process of developing, implementing, and updating climate policies, plans, strategies, and actions at all levels. Third, increasing the availability of disaggregated data. The linkages between the climate and biodiversity crisis are becoming more visible each day. And this is why I very much welcome the fact that also the Convention on Biological Diversity will also have its own gender plan of action. As climate and biodiversity are in the heart of our ICI projects, it is great to see that both UNFCCC and CBD consider gender such an important aspect. Thank you very much for your attention. Moreover, thank you for your commitment. Together, we are sending an important signal about the importance of gender in the context of climate change.
Dr. Paulus, thank you very much indeed. Mainstreaming gender justice across our programming is a really strong signal, and thank you for leading on that. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to ask the Maldives to close this panel as one of the existing co-leads of the Feminist Action for Climate Justice Action Coalition. I will turn to their Special Envoy to Climate Change, Mrs. Sabra Noordin, to tell us about her country's journey to becoming a co-lead of this Action Coalition, which we have heard many countries are joining today. Over to you, Sabra.
Thank you, Minister. Excellency, distinguished delegates, good morning. I'd like to begin by welcoming and commending the initiatives made by those that spoke before me. In addition to improving gender equality in your own countries, I hope the success of your work will allow many others to adopt similar programs. I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Maldives, who chose to co-lead feminist action for climate justice within the Generation Equality Forum, along with Costa Rica in consortium with the Latin American Faculty of Social Science and the National Institute for Women. In the Maldives, just as in many other countries, the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted women's livelihoods, care burden, and mental health. Similarly, with respect to climate change, those who suffer most are those who have always suffered the most, the poor, the marginalized, and in particular, women and girls in rural areas. In some, add in the climate crisis, and all of the day-to-day challenges intensify tenfold. Women and girls play a leading role in advocacy for climate justice in the Maldives. Much of this stems from the fact that the climate emergency presents an existential crisis for the Maldives and our way of life. The impact of global heating is not an abstract scenario, but one that already directly impacts women on our islands, making a living growing crops which are now more frequently destroyed by severe storms, or the family that runs a guest house who has to spend more per year to place sandbags on the shore for protection against encroaching waves. These voices are integral in our efforts to conserve the resources vital to our livelihoods. With the right kind of facilitation, we have seen the successful transition of many of these advocacy efforts to progressive policy. An achievement we are very proud of is our newly amended Decentralization Act, which ensures that women make up 1/3 of the newly elected local councils. This is a guaranteed 384 out of 982 seats. I'm happy to say that 388 women councillors were elected this year. Along with greater financial independence and an increase in budget for the councils, the number of women now in leadership and policy roles, especially at a local government level, is both encouraging and exciting. We've also implemented other structural policies, such as increasing paid maternity leave to 6 months, paid paternity leave to 1 month, and appointing women justices to the Supreme Court for the first time. The translation of women's experiences and views into policy is central to climate just solutions. Our gender equality plan, which is in the process of being finalized, sees the mainstreaming of gender equality measures throughout government, including increasing the number of women in leadership positions in local government by 45% by 2025, in the judiciary by 15%, and providing services such as daycare, initiating gender-responsive budgeting, and revising our national data systems to include disaggregation of data by sex and age. We have a lot more work to do, but we want to do it because we know that having more women at the table means the questions that are asked, the discussions that take place, and the decisions that are taken are a truer reflection of our society and our needs. Investing in gender equality is paramount to progressive climate action. From caregivers, surf instructors, marine biologists, resort managers, and ministers, we have seen a greater focus on climate just solutions with the increase of women in these leadership roles. It is both an ambitious mitigation and adaptation measure. But all of this is dependent on the ambition agreed to here this week. We need to have emissions by 2030 to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. We have only 98 months to do this. I thank you.
Sabra, thank you very much indeed, and I think all those of us in this room who are female politicians at any level send our heartiest congratulations and good luck to those 388 new female councillors. That's really exciting. And for all of you that aren't yet taking up a political baton, I recommend that you try it. Sometimes it's challenging, but as the lady I'm about to introduce knows, it's also extremely fulfilling and it genuinely makes a difference. So may I thank all of my wonderful panelists this morning, to those of you who've already made commitments earlier this year at the launch of the Feminist Action of Climate Justice Action Coalition. These commitments signal a significant step forwards in our work to tackle climate change and gender equality, but collectively there is much more for us all still to do. So I call on all other countries represented in this room or not here today to become commitment makers under the Feminist Action for Climate Justice. So for our next session, chaired by the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, we will welcome to the stage women who have led climate action in a variety of contexts to share their thoughts and experiences. But before then, we'll have another video submission, this time from the Equality Fund's Dialogue on Feminist Climate Action.
Mi nombre es Angélica Cheniroc y yo soy coordinadora de Agua y Vida, Mujeres, Derechos y Ambiente. Nosotras somos una organización ecofeminista que trabaja conjuntamente con mujeres indígenas, campesinas y urbanas marginadas en el estado sureño de Chiapas. Desde hace más de 20 años, las mujeres campesinas ya no saben cuándo sembrar el maíz y otros cultivos, porque ya no sabemos cuándo va a llover. Tampoco sabemos en qué cantidad y en qué frecuencia vienen las lluvias. Aquí en Chiapas, tanto las organizaciones de las mujeres como los movimientos feministas hemos estado visibilizando esta situación y los impactos diferenciados del cambio climático en la vida de las mujeres, en especial las mujeres empobrecidas y racializadas. En estos 26 años hemos visto que las decisiones basadas en acuerdos políticos que no llegan al fondo del problema, que es el sistema económico capitalista, patriarcal y colonial, la temperatura del planeta seguirá aumentando y amenazando todas las formas de vida. Nosotras, como mujeres, abogamos por un cambio real, por soluciones concretas, efectivas, desde lo local, orientadas hacia el cuidado de todas las formas de vida del planeta. Que solo tenemos un planeta, que es nuestra responsabilidad cuidarlo, protegerlo y defenderlo. Y que otra economía basada en la vida, basada en el cuidado de la tierra, sí es posible, si realmente existe el compromiso y la valentía política de cambiar el sistema.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to invite another vocal advocate for gender equality, the Honourable Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Madam Minister, for leading that beautiful panel today. We came with a great and distinguished delegation from the Congress of the United States. We came to listen, we came to learn, and what we heard gives us great hope. It is a privilege to be here with the congressional delegation to join you today as we act upon the climate crisis, the existential threat of our time. It's a threat multiplier, amplifying and accelerating existing inequities in our economies and societies. 80% of people displaced in climate change globally are women. Addressing the rapidly changing climate is a matter of justice and equality with the most vulnerable, most affected, including indigenous communities, less developed countries, and our focus today and every day on women. To that end, we come here fresh from advancing the most ambitious and consequential climate and clean energy legislation of all time in our country. I acknowledge and now I want to recognize our distinguished delegation, if they would all rise, the largest delegation to ever attend such a meeting. We're so proud of them. Thank you all. Again, we learned, we've gained hope listening this morning and being reported to in the course of the past week. But we're here today to report on what we have done. This is a nearly $1 trillion investment in Build Back Better and bipartisan infrastructure framework, recognizes the interconnectedness of climate change and gender justice, and enables women and girls to lead a just transition to a clean energy economy of the future. Our legislation advances our mission to decarbonize and realign every sector of the economy. It is a model of collaboration that brings together public, private, and nonprofit sectors to scale the solutions necessary for achieving net zero pollution globally. These bills are far-reaching in scale and scope, ensuring that the design, manufacturing, financing, and deployment of our economy, our future economy, is cleaner and greener. That means hundreds of billions of dollars for clean energy tax credits, resilience, environmental justice, and state, local, regional-led climate solutions where women play a key role. It also is an investment in our care economy, child care, family and medical leave. It's about home health care. It's about universal pre-K, all of the things that liberate women to play a more important role in our economy. All of this advances President Biden's plan to cut climate pollution in half by 2030 and net zero by 2050, as he and Special Envoy John Kerry have presented already here. And we're very proud of our leadership on this subject. I'm proud that this legislation's commitment to tackling climate change for the world and for women, and by the end of this year, we will pass legislation toward doubling our international climate finance commitments. Chairman Meeks is here to talk about that later today. We are also proud of our chair of the Select Committee on Climate Crisis, Kathy Castor, for launching the most ambitious climate action plan in American history. It's Build Back Better with Women. Build Back Better with Women. I want to also recognize the great women members of our delegation so that you know that in making these decisions that women have a seat at the head of the table. Eddie Bernice Johnson, Betty McCollum, Shelley Pingree, Suzanne Bonamici, Julia Brownlee, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Veronica Escobar. Now, people ask me all the time for many years, if you ruled the world, what one thing would you do? If I ruled the world, the one thing that I would do is invest in the education of women and girls and their empowerment. You and I know that makes all the difference in the world, not just to their women, those women, to their families, to the communities, to their countries, to the world. So I thank you for the opportunity, Madam Minister, thank you, and the President as well, to participate in this timely conversation. Thank you for recognizing the centrality of women in the climate fight. And thank you to the women and young women people who have been mobilizing. We always say in Congress, inside maneuvering can just go so far. The outside mobilization makes everything better. And so let's thank those young people for their mobilization, and women as well. And they're true to our mantra, we don't agonize, we organize. We organize. So let's thank them for what they're doing out there. Again, because we believe that when women succeed, the world succeeds. And so, as President Biden has said, America is back, together for the planet, for the women, for our children. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you this morning. And now it is my privilege to introduce First Minister Nicola Sturgeon of Scotland.
Thank you very much indeed, Speaker Pelosi, for that inspiring address to us. And let me issue a very warm welcome to you and to the entire congressional delegation from the United States to Glasgow. You're very welcome here, and we look forward to you being part of our discussions over the next few days. When women succeed, the world succeeds. Speaker Pelosi's words there, I think, are an inspiring introduction into this next part of our Gender Day discussions. It is my great pleasure to be chairing this panel. There is no doubt we must ensure that climate change is a feminist issue. We must make sure that the experiences of women and girls across the world, so often disproportionately impacted by climate change, are understood as we devise the solutions. And we must make sure that the voices of women are at the centre of creating and implementing the solutions to climate change. So this is an opportunity to discuss some of that. I was very proud to launch last week, in partnership with UN Women, the Glasgow Women's Leadership Statement, which has already attracted support from governments, businesses and civic organisations across the world. My thanks also go to those governments who have just announced commitments under the Feminist Action for Climate Justice Action Coalition, and to those from civil society who will follow our discussion. And I'm delighted to join them in announcing today that Scotland will become a commitment maker, focusing on capacity building and resilience, access to finance and supporting women and girls to lead a just transition. So these are important times, and this is, of course, an important discussion. Let me therefore introduce this fantastic panel that I have the privilege to chair today. Fatou Dieng is the founder of Clean Earth Gambia, the Women and Gender Lead for Youngo, an Achieving Scholar at Sussex University. Tarsila Riveri Zia is a Quechuan activist from Peru who has dedicated her life to defending and promoting the rights of indigenous people and cultures. And Asa Regner is Deputy Executive Director at UN Women and a former Minister for Gender Equality in Sweden. So please give them a warm welcome here today. I want to kick off this discussion by posing to all three of our panel members today this question, asking them to give their views on what the top priorities are for us all to better tackle the nexus between gender and climate. And I will address that question first of all to Asa. Welcome.
Thank you so much, First Minister, and thank you for organizing this. And Fatou and Tarsila, thank you. It's lovely to be here with you. Speaker Pelosi, thank you for your introduction. Very impressive. Also, thank you to those of you, First Minister, who mentioned the Action Coalition on Climate Change and Gender Equality. From UN Women's side, which I represent, we have seen throughout the years in the 80 countries where we have programs and where we target and work together with the poorest women, how much climate change really affects their lives in reality. This can be in the Pacific, this can be in Latin America, and also in the Amazon. It can be in the Sahel, obviously, where women fight the effects of climate change in armed conflict or in farmer-herder conflicts, in agriculture, food security, in their daily lives. But they also claim, and they have the right to be decision makers, and their claims and demands have the right to be heard. So that's why UN Women, together with member states, the private sector and experts, took the initiative to something called the Generation Equality, to close the gap between the gender inequalities in the world and the reality that we see. And the Action Coalition on Climate Justice is one example, one initiative to gather those who want to change the world in terms of gender justice, gender equality, and the effects of climate change. So thank you everybody for engaging in that. I also wanted to say to
Nos incluye a las mujeres indígenas, porque no se discute